Colorado, number 22 in the Associated Press polls top 25. And as I had mentioned, it's their first time appearing in the AP top 25 since December 6th, 2020. That is phenomenal. And frankly, what I expected after what Colorado did at Texas Christian, getting a road win against an AP top 25 team, and being so good that not only did they get ranked, but you can see Texas Christian is not here, right? We'll talk about why they are in my top 25 when we get there. But I think it's important to remember that what Deion Sanders has done is kind of unprecedented, because it's not just that he threw for 510 yards. It's that he did it against a quality top 25 opponent. I need to stress that part. We've seen guys go for 4 bills in week 1 openers. It happened actually about 5 times this week, right? What we did not see them do was go for 5 bills against a top 25 opponent. The point that I would raise on this one is Caleb Williams has thrown for 597 yards over 2 weeks of football against opponents that are not ranked in the top 25. He has the Heisman Trophy. Deion Sanders did this against the Texas Christian team that finished national title runner-up last year and started the season as one of the 25 best teams in our sport. Not something to actually sneeze at, right? And that's before we talk about what Travis Hunter did, which is something nobody has done in the last 20 years of the sport. Have over 100 yards receiving with a TD and an interception, playing both ways. I talked to a number of people about his NFL prospects, but the thing for you to remember is that he's a true sophomore, meaning the NFL has to keep his hands off of him for the next 2 years. Meanwhile, Deion Sanders edging toward first-round draft pick consideration already. And we got lots of folks that are coming around to the show for the first time. I'd like to welcome you. We love it here. It's family. You my kinfolk, right? You listen to the show because we've been in on what Colorado has done from the very beginning. I mean, I had them ranked in my way too early top 25 in January, again in my way too early spring, in March, again in my post-spring in May, in my preseason in August, and now the Associated Press and frankly the rest of the sporting world has caught up to what kind of a change agent one Coach Prime is. And then, at the top here, Florida State edges into the college football playoff spot off of a win against LSU, 45-24. I thought that they played phenomenally in the second half, right? 31 unanswered points before LSU found a way to get into the end zone. But I'm not sure that they're a top 4 team, and I'll talk about why as we get into my rankings, but I wanted to cite them there because that is a huge leap up against what was a top 5 opponent according to the AP voters. But I'm going to go ahead and tell you, the AP voters have LSU at number 14. Guess where I had LSU in my preseason ranking? Number 14. Guess where I have them in my week 2 ranking? Number 14. Okay. All right. We'll talk a bit more as we get into my rankings about why that is and why I felt like I was justified and saw something like that coming. Nobody saw a 21-point loss for LSU coming. I thought it was going to be a tight game like it was the year before last with Florida State winning it. By the way, I'm 6-0 in picks so far, right? I'm just going to throw that out there. But we also have seen really, I thought we would see a little bit more movement in the top 25, but not so much that Alabama would be number 3 and Florida State be number 4, and Ohio State would get docked for a 20-point win against Indiana. Again, rankings, right? But I have a hard time docking people for winning. I want to reward people for winning. I want to reward people for playing tough opponents, right? Texas Christian, LSU, you played a tough opponent in your week 1. I don't feel like your ranking should be that affected by a loss, especially in the case of Texas Christian when it was a close loss. And when you look at statistics and how the game played out for LSU, it's actually a tighter game to me than I think others might think. Other teams to cite here, North Carolina moves to 17 off of a win against South Carolina. And we're looking at Clemson, who is at number 25 after beginning the preseason at number 9. And you'll see in the AP ranking at 21, the team that beat them, that throttled them, frankly, in Duke. I say throttled them, but that game was weird. Dabo Swinney has been taken out of context. Look at me defending Dabo Swinney. When he said, look, I've never been a part of a game like that in my entire coaching career. And immediately people thought he was talking about a losing effort like that, like they were embarrassed. And no, it was weird. It was really weird. Now, Duke beat them straight up. Great defense and great individual play from Riley Leonard, who I think had like 273 total yards, 98 on the ground, 12 rushes. But again, I saw a Clemson team that just had some miscues that I've never seen before, right? Cade Klubnik, played the worst game that I've ever seen him play, period. Certainly the worst game that he's ever played in college. And this is a guy who we knew about, right? This is not an unknown commodity. This is a man who came off the bench in the ACC title game and ended up with the ACC title game MVP. He is the reason they won 10 games. He is the reason they made the Orange Bowl. So we all thought adding a Garrett Riley to just what was not necessarily a bad offense, but an offense that wasn't scoring 40 a game like we come to see in the Trevor Lawrence era would make them better. And I thought maybe that would show against Duke. I don't think anybody saw Duke upsetting Clemson. I'm being very, very honest about that because there's a lot of stuff I see coming based on analysis, based on tradition, based on what the past can inform about the future. Is why I'm such a history buff. Is I want to maintain what we do in the present. I want to know why we're doing it now based on what we did in the past. But nothing about Duke should have led me to believe that they were going to upset Clemson, except one fact. Duke won 9 games last year when it feels like nobody was looking. They went 9-4 while LSU went 10-4. You'll see now in the rankings, there's not that much distance between them, 21-14, because that's the margins here, right? As much as we want to look at the scoreboard, one of the things that folks that, are on the comments of the YouTube channel and leave reviews on the podcast is, hey, did you watch the games? Because if you look at the scoreboard, it'll tell you a different story than the one that you watch. And I think in both cases, LSU and Duke weren't outclassed. They had some miscues that really just did not go their way. And frankly, it's a game of who made the fewest mistakes as much as it's a game about who capitalized on the mistakes that were made. And Duke is another example of that. Very excited to see what they can do the rest of the way because they got everybody coming to them this year, right? Like they get Notre Dame coming to them this year. That's going to be a lot of fun. You know, we'll see just what that means in an ACC without divisions where for the first time in its history, or since it went to divisions, I have to say, we are going to see possibly Florida State play Clemson or even Clemson play Duke again. It's all on the table right now after week 1. Yes, nobody is out of the college football playoff unless I go looking at history about where people were ranked and we can say it's never happened before. But right now it's really difficult to say that anybody can't make the college football playoff because anybody has. We've seen a G5 team get an invite and we've seen teams that did not even play in their conference title games get an invite. So it's all there for everybody. It's just about how does the selection committee feel about you. And that's why we care about these rankings so early. I understand people that are saying that, we shouldn't be ranking people before November. And I'm saying, yeah, but some of us are. I'm gonna. And you don't want me to be the only person ranking people, right? And as long as we're going to rank people, we're also going to rank them with what can we expect with the college football playoff selection committee looking to take up this baton and carry it all the way to December following those conference title games. And I think the top 25 still does a really good job of getting us in a rhythm for what it is that we want to see out of those 4 teams selected for the college football playoff, because that's what it's about. Which 4 teams do we want to see play against each other or play each other again? So let's go from the Associated Press Week 2 Top 25 to my Week 2 Top 25. And let's take a look at who moved around, right? You'll know that I'm on the Colorado hype train, but I'm not going to overreact to them beating a team that I ranked at number 15 in Texas Christian in my preseason poll. That was a ranked matchup for me. And it went down about the way that I thought it would go down, which is close scoring. I didn't think that you were going to see 87 points scored, and I'm sure both of those head coaches weren't in on that, but it was tight. And from the moment that Colorado took offensive possession of the ball and went down and got a score, everybody was made to understand not just that Colorado is for real. We've known that, or at least I've known that. It's that they have the talent and the depth to go at top 25 programs and get W's, right? That was what we learned most about them is they can do it on both sides of the ball. Yes, they have some things they got to clean up. That run defense is still a bugaboo. You can't give up 164 rush yards on 14 rushes to one man and expect to keep winning football games, right? That defensive line, that front 7, they got some work to do. Charles Kelly's got to get that right. Their special teams might lose them some games this year that they would have otherwise won if they don't clean that up. But that's also about just how deep you are. You go deep on the defensive side of the ball, you're probably going to have more defensive side guys playing special teams. Same thing with offense. But the thing about playing offensive guys on special teams is not all those offensive guys like to go hit people. And that's also special teams oriented. It's guys that want to go hit people. It's called Suicide Squad for a reason. You are running down to try to hurt people. You're trying to put them on the ground. That's not necessarily what an offensive man wants to do. So I could see them trying to get a little bit more of that D that you see on Travis Hunter's chest, that dog, into that special teams. And if they do that, they got a shot here. I'm also going to go ahead and reference Duke being at number 22 for me. 21, right, for the Associated Press poll. We basically agree about that. But I got Texas Christian at 23 after their loss to Colorado, whereas the AP poll has them out. Again, it was a top 25 matchup for me. And I don't want to dock Texas Christian, who played a really great football game, for losing by 3 and basically forcing it into the last 5 minutes of the game and forcing Colorado to get a stop to stop them going down and tying the game, right? That we're talking about a Texas Christian team that was good last year and has a lot of the parts that made them good this year. I understand that people want to put probably more on guys that played last year, particularly Max Duggan, than I think they're really capable of carrying, right? I'm looking at Quentin Johnson. I'm going, what's the big difference between him and Savion Williams this year? Not a whole hell of a lot, right? It's about guys like Jared Wiley who are going to make them good. It's almost like people forgot about that. And because Joe Gillespie's defense gave up 45 to an offensive dynamo who's got an outstanding shot caller in Sean Lewis, people are down on Texas Christian in a 3-man front. Fine, right? I think Texas Christian is going to be a good football team. It wouldn't surprise me if they win 8 or 9 games this year. Or if they end up in the Big 12 title game, I think they're pretty good. Clemson's at 24 for me. It's at a 25, right? This was some moving and some shaking that really kept me up a little bit longer than I wanted to be after it was very clear that Duke was going to run away with this football game. But I remember watching this game and looking at all the drives that Clemson did not finish. And I was texting with producer Tyler about this going, it's not that they're bad. It's that they made mistakes that you just don't see them make. Phil Maffa fumbling the football like on the goal line and then Duke running it back. Hey, Klubnik looking like he didn't know what the play call was, fumbling the snap inside the red zone. We're talking about 11 play drives, right? 18 play drives that did not end in points. We're talking about a kicker that Dabo felt really good about telling people about, who might have been the most talented, might still be the most talented kicker that has ever been at Clemson, getting 2 kicks blocked, right? Like nothing would go right for Clemson in that game against Duke. And credit to Duke. Mike Elko had those guys believing in what I think is really an interesting message to be relaying right now, which is that he plans to win right now at Duke. Now, there are a lot of ways to go down. But when Duke nukes you in football as a top 10 opponent, I don't know how you come back from that. Like, that is the ultimate we hate them basketball school showing up 46 days before basketball season starts to claim the ACC title, the ACC champions belt from them, from their cold dead body. We had Dukies rush the field on Clemson and didn't nobody say, why are they rushing the field? Everybody understood, right? That's where Clemson is right now. But it's also, that's terrifying Clemson for me. Because now Dabo gets to point at everybody and say, they think you suck. They think you're bad. They think that you're not going to win 10 games for a 13th consecutive year. Goodness me. And now they're going to be on the warpath. And they got a dude in Garrett Riley who still knows how to call plays and is going to take a lot of learns from what they were doing well, particularly their 2-back sets. And Wes Goodwin, who's going to learn, hey, look, I can't let my linebackers get stretched out like this. Barrett Carter and Jeremiah Trotter were out in coverage way more than you want them to be. You want those guys coming downhill to stuff the run. And again, we're talking about Duke, who watched the tape and put their guys into positions to succeed. And Riley Leonard, who all shucks attitude, ends up rumbling, bumbling, stumbling 44 yards for a TD, absolutely playing the position the way that every college football quarterback wants to play the position, right? I get to run it. I get to throw it. It's basically him playing NCAA against Clemson, which was a lot of fun. But this gets me back to Texas Christian and what they were doing, why they lost that game and I still have them ranked, or why I don't overreact with Colorado being ranked at number 18 for me. So let's take a look at Florida State LSU, given that thought. I had LSU At number 14, I guess I have 13 this year because, again, Duke shuffled. So number 13, excuse me, this week and 14 last week. Okay. I had Florida State as a top 10 team, but not a top 4 team. And I didn't want to overreact to them beating a team that I did not think was a top 5 team by any stretch, right? So they get a win against a good LSU team in what is a neutral field, but it's in Orlando, Florida, right? And you're Florida State and they're LSU. I got a hard time with that one being neutral, right? But I also saw a game in which there was a moment when I wouldn't have trusted Jordan Travis to cook my grits. Hell, if Keon Coleman didn't show up, I don't think that I would have trusted Jordan Travis to lay the table. You know what I'm saying? Like that first quarter, 7 penalties in the first quarter. It looked like Jordan was trying to throw the football to the other teams time to time. He was running around for his life, not necessarily because he wanted to. When Trey Benson was working, they didn't keep feeding him the rock. I saw drop after drop after drop from guys that I'm not used to seeing drop the football. Jaheim Bell and Johnny Wilson in particular. I saw them get 4th down stops against LSU inside the red zone. I did not expect that. I also saw them gave up 347 yards passing and 100 yards rushing. All right. If they did not come alive, I should say, if Keon Coleman did not come alive, we're probably talking about a different scoreboard here. And we're talking about a much closer game. So I'm not in on Florida State being the 4th best team in college football. Not yet, right? They could still get there for me, but I didn't want to overreact to this. I also wanted to give LSU its due in that LSU was playing without Mason Smith, right? And we're also talking about an LSU that was still trying to figure out what to do with Harold Perkins. I think they're overthinking this. Don't have that dude doing everything. Have that dude rushing the passer. That's what he did great last year. I get that everybody wants to develop a full-time linebacker and whatnot, but if that dude's elite at getting into the backfield, just let that dude get into the backfield. Let's not make this difficult, right? I think the LSU is going to be a good football team, but are they the best team in the SEC West? Clearly, I don't think so, and neither does the AP. We both think that that's Alabama, and we're going to stick to that. Another thing to note here, as we talk about those 4 teams, Colorado, Texas Christian, LSU, and Florida State, is I took a look at the 247 Sports Composite, all right, which the talent composite, which ranks these teams on their rosters according to how many 4-star, 5-stars they have, regardless of classification, right? It's a really great way to find out who's the most talented year to year. At number 20 on that ranking is Florida State, the number 4 team in the country, according to the AP, right? At number 19 on that same list is Texas Christian, a team that I rank that the AP does not think is a top 25 team anyway, even though they've got more talent on the roster, empirical data, than Florida State. Number 7 on that same talent composite is LSU. And number 22 on that thing is Nebraska. So, like, we're looking around and we're saying, okay, do you have the talent? Check. Do you have the coaching? Maybe, right? And do your kids think that they're supposed to win? And this is kind of the Michigan of it all for me, because Michigan is number 14 on the talent composite. And it doesn't seem to matter for them that they are not one of the 5-4 most talented teams in the sport. They play for each other, and we're making fun of Jim Harbaugh for saying things like we fence, but they know who they are. They run to their identity, and they love it when people make fun of them because they get to rally around each other. I'm done doubting Michigan. Like, I got into that trap last year based on much of the same sort of analysis that I would use for anybody else, right? And it just doesn't matter in Ann Arbor. They're going to do what they're going to do, and I'm just going to watch them and say, no, it's a good football team. That's what I'm going to do. So to round this part up with the talent composite, Colorado beat a more talented team than the team that FSU is, right? And they beat a more talented team than the AP thinks they are. So let me round this out. If you are still wondering if Colorado is good, you shouldn't be. If you're still wondering if Florida State is good, maybe. Or if we're talking about a top 14, right? You should still wonder. If we're talking about is LSU good, yes, they're good, they're fine. If you're wondering if Texas Christian is bad, they're not, they're good. But that's what makes the sport kind of fun. And after week 1, we're going to react. People do these shows called overreaction shows. I'm like, what else is there to react to? Like, what are we doing here? Like, are we making fun of each other because we want to talk about the sport after 1 week of football? Hell, I don't want to talk about the sport after 1 week of football because that's all we got to talk about. It ain't like we got 10 weeks of regular season football to talk through here. And when we do, we'll react to that too. And you know what? It's not going to matter to many people if Clemson lost to Duke the way that they did after week 1. If Clemson reels off 10 in a row, people are going to say that's a different football team. That team doesn't exist anymore. And we're going to pull our hair out as we try to figure out who the 4 best teams in the sport are. All I'm asking is some consistency. I get that the sport is irrational on its face, and I get that we as fans only care about our one damn team, so much so that we're thinking about, is Ryan Day the guy as he wins 47 games and loses 6? Stupid. But that's what it is, right? I just want you to keep something like a level head about some of it and get excited for things that it's easy to get excited for, like Colorado and like Duke. I want to put this Duke point in front of you. 14 games as Duke's head coach, Mike Elko has already led the Blue Devils to their 3rd 9-win season since 1941, right? So, my goodness. Their first win over Clemson since 2004. That was Monday night. Their first top 10 win since Steve Spurrier was head coach at Duke in 1989, and their first multi-touchdown victory over a top 10 opponent since 1952. Holy smokes, man. So much has changed in that time that we got to talk about Duke being a, bless God, good football team. All right. Last thing I want to point out here is North Carolina in my top. It wasn't in my top 25. South Carolina was in that spot. They beat South Carolina pretty soundly. I was more impressed with what North Carolina did defensively than I was with what Drake May did offensively, which ought to be terrifying for ACC fans because North Carolina's defense was the thing that I didn't know about. And that's the reason I didn't rank them in the preseason. Whereas South Carolina, you beat Tennessee, you beat Clemson, you return a bunch of those parts, even as you lose Marshawn Lloyd to USC and Jaheim Bell to Florida State. I felt good about that, right? And then you go and you soundly beat up on South Carolina. Okay, you're here now because Drake May is going to have 300, 400-yard passing performances, and he's going to put himself out there as one of the best players in the sport once again. And shout out to Mack Brown, who became the first coach in history to win 100 games at 2 different programs, Texas and now North Carolina. Man is already in the College Football Hall of Fame. I don't know how many more flowers we're going to be able to give Mack Brown. I mean, after you beat up on SC in 2005, Mack Brown could never, like, he could do nothing else. And I still think he's one of the better coaches to ever coach in this sport. And now we have this to go on. That's pretty outstanding.